Let me ask you a question before we begin. Do you think you fully know your parents? She thought so too, until the day they died and left only two things: a short letter and a house in a small town in rural Oregon. She didn't go there looking for answers. She went because she had nowhere else to go. The road was long, surrounded by huge forests and mountains, and the more she drove, the more she felt she wasn't leaving anything behind. She was being pulled. The town seemed too normal. Polite people, clean streets, rehearsed smiles. But everyone looked at her as if they already knew her, and that's never a good sign. Her parents' house was untouched. Photos in place, furniture as it always was, as if time had stopped, waiting for her. On the first night, the floor vibrated slightly. It wasn't an earthquake, it was something different. She tried to ignore it. In the following days, she noticed that no one talked about the mountains. Ever, and whenever she asked about her parents, the subject changed too quickly. It was as if there were invisible rules in that town. On the third night, she woke to a deep sound coming from under the house. When she went outside, she saw something she would never forget. A faint glow emerging from within the mountains. Not in the sky, in the rock. The next morning, she found an envelope in the living room. No name, no explanation. Inside, just one sentence. If you're hearing the mountains, it's too late to pretend to be normal. At that moment, she understood something important. Her parents hadn't just left a house. They had left a secret. And that town existed to protect it. Now, pay attention to this. When something strange happens once, you call it a coincidence. When it happens twice, you start to get suspicious. But when everyone around you acts like nothing is happening, that's when the fear really begins. From that envelope on, she began to feel something clearly. She was no longer alone. In the street, people smiled as always, but their gazes lingered a second longer. Conversations died down when she approached. And the strangest part, no one asked who she was. They all already knew. At the coffee shop, the waitress called her by name without ever being introduced. At the market, the cashier commented that her parents would be proud. Proud of what, exactly? She hadn't even started anything. The mountains were still there, at the end of every street. Motionless, silent. But now she was sure. They weren't just watching, they were waiting. It was on a walk near the forest that she met him. Quiet, reserved. Different from the others because he didn't feign normality. They walked together for a few minutes, in silence. Until he stopped, looked directly at her, and said the only sentence that mattered. You shouldn't be here. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning. Before she could ask anything, he left. And in that instant, she felt something strange in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. That night, the power went out again. But this time, it didn't come back immediately. In the dark, the sound came stronger, coming from under the house. A slow, steady rhythm, almost like breathing. She held the doorknob, trying to decide if it was crazy to go down to the basement. And that's when she heard something that made her blood run cold. Footsteps, not in the house. Outside. When she peeked through the window, she saw shadows standing on the street. Motionless, watching. When the lights came back on, the shadows were gone. As if they had never been there. The next day, the town was different. Too calm, too organized. As if everyone was waiting for her to make a mistake. And maybe they already knew what it would be. Because that afternoon, when she returned home, she found the basement door open. She was absolutely sure she had left it closed. And from down there, coming from the depths of the house, the sound returned. Louder, clearer. Calling. Let's be honest here. Everyone says they would ignore strange signs. But when they start following you into your own home, you change your mind. She stood before the basement door for long seconds. The sound came from downstairs, clearer now. It wasn't wind, it wasn't plumbing. It was rhythm, as if something huge was operating beneath her feet. She went down. Each step felt colder than the last. The air grew heavy, hard to breathe. And then she saw it. The back wall wasn't exactly a wall. There were marks in the concrete, almost invisible lines, as if something had been sealed there a long time ago, and it wasn't made to last forever. When she touched the surface, the sound stopped. Immediately, the silence was worse. The next morning, she noticed something even more unsettling. The mountains were closer. Not physically, but in feeling. It was as if the town had been purposely built to never forget them. She tried to talk to someone, anyone. But whenever she brought it up, the same answer came, said in different ways. It's better not to get involved. Some things work better when not questioned. Your parents understood that. That last sentence was the one that hurt the most. Because now she was sure. Her parents didn't just know. They participated. That afternoon, she found the young man again. This time, he didn't try to leave. He looked at her with an ancient weariness in his eyes and said, "If you keep looking, they will notice." "They who?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "The ones who live under all this." Before she could insist, a deep sound echoed through the town. It didn't come from the sky. It came from the earth. People stopped. No one ran. No one screamed. Everyone just looked at the mountains, as if it were normal. That night, the glow returned. Stronger, closer. And then, for the first time, she felt something different. Not fear, an invitation. As if the mountains were responding to her presence. As if they recognized her. She understood, finally, what that town really was. Not a home, not a community, but a cover. And if that were true, then what was hidden down there wasn't just technology. It was an entire world. And it was waking up. There is a huge difference between suspecting and knowing. Suspecting still lets you sleep at night. Knowing does not. After the strange events, she began to feel the city in a different way. As if every street had eyes. As if every house were part of a larger system, operating in silence. Nothing seemed out of place. And that was precisely the problem. The young man kept appearing. Never at the same time. Never in the same way. Sometimes walking, sometimes just standing, watching from a distance. He seemed to carry a weight too ancient for someone so young. A weight that didn't come from age, but from knowledge. It was on a cloudy afternoon, when the wind brought the smell of wet earth from the mountains, that he finally said more than he should. "They know you feel it." She frowned. Feel what? He took a while to answer. The call. The word hung in the air, heavy. She didn't laugh, she didn't doubt. Because, deep down, she had been feeling it for days. He explained without explaining. He spoke of shifts, of schedules that shouldn't change, of things that needed to remain hidden for everything to keep working. And for the first time, she understood. The city didn't live around the mountains. It existed because of them. At night, the sound returned, more intense. It didn't just come from the basement now. It seemed to pass through the whole house. The walls vibrated slightly. Objects moved almost imperceptibly. And yet, the neighbors slept peacefully. She went outside. The sky was clear. The stars strangely aligned over the mountains. The glow appeared again, stronger, more defined, like lines drawn on the rock, forming patterns that didn't seem natural. She felt something in her chest, a mixture of fear and belonging. The next day, she found marks on the ground near the forest. They weren't footprints. They were perfectly symmetrical tracks, as if something had been transported there recently. When the young man appeared again, she didn't wait for explanations. "They're underground, aren't they?" He didn't deny it. "There's much more than that," he replied. "But not everyone is supposed to see it." She thought of her parents, of the short letter, of the house left behind. None of it had been an accident. That night, she decided to consciously follow the sound for the first time. Without running, without denying. The forest seemed to open a path before her. The air grew colder as she approached the mountains. And then it happened. The rock before her lit up. Not with violence, but with precision. As if the mountain recognized her. She placed her hand on the cold surface, and felt the vibration pass through her entire body. On the other side, something awoke. Something ancient, advanced, and extremely aware of who she was. In that instant, she understood the truth that changed everything. She hadn't just inherited a house. She had inherited a connection, and the hidden world beneath the mountains had finally found who it was looking for. Until that moment, everything she knew came from signs, silences, and incomplete warnings. But there are truths that are not content to remain hidden. They demand to be seen. When the rock lit up before her, the world she knew began to crumble. There was no explosion, no noise. The mountains simply opened the ground, vibrated gently, as if something ancient were awakening after a long rest. A passage appeared where before there was only solid stone, revealing a deep descent, bathed in a cold, bluish light. She hesitated, and in that instant, the young man appeared behind her. He didn't seem surprised, he seemed resigned. "This is how it began," he said, almost to himself. She didn't ask if she should enter. She already knew the answer. The descent was long. As they advanced, the air changed. Cleaner, more controlled. Nothing like an improvised tunnel. This was a structure. When they reached the end, she stopped, unable to process what she saw. Beneath the mountains, there was a city. Not caves, not ruins. A living city, illuminated by systems that seemed impossible for any known technology. Suspended structures, translucent paths, silent mechanisms working in perfect synchrony. It was another world, and it had always been there. The people moving about the place stopped when they saw her. Some curious, others tense. She felt it immediately. She was not just a visitor. She was a problem. The young man led her through wide corridors to a circular room. In the center, a luminous panel projected three-dimensional maps of the mountains, the city above, and her parents' house. "They were guardians," he said finally. "Before you were born." She felt her heart race. Her parents had not just lived there. They helped build the balance between the two worlds. There was an agreement, an ancient pact. The underground faction possessed technology capable of altering energy, matter, and even entire natural fields. In exchange for isolation, they needed humans who could move between worlds without raising suspicion. Her parents were these intermediaries, but something changed. There was a division within the underground world, a group that believed that the isolation was over, that the surface should be controlled, not just observed. And now, with her parents gone, the balance was broken. "They want you," the young man said firmly, "because you are the last legitimate connection." She felt the weight of it fall on her shoulders. It was not a choice she had made. It was an inheritance. An alarm sounded. Lights changed hue. The atmosphere in the room transformed. "They know you've entered," someone said in the background. The young man grabbed her arm. "This is no longer about curiosity," he said. "It's about survival." She looked at that hidden city, at that impossible technology, at those people who saw in her either a threat or a solution, and in that instant, she became aware of the real conflict. If she stayed, she could become the key to dominating the world above. If she fled, she would condemn both sides to collapse. The underground world was not just a secret. It was a battlefield about to explode. And she was at the center of it. Nothing remains stable for long when truths come to light. And, in that world beneath the mountains, her arrival was the trigger for something that had been postponed for years. After the alarm, the rhythm of the city changed. The once silent corridors now pulsed with movement. The lights varied in intensity, as if the system itself were on alert. She felt the stares. Some carried hope. Others, resentment. It was impossible to please everyone, and dangerous to displease the wrong ones. The young man walked beside her, attentive to every detail. She realized he knew this place far too well. He wasn't just a messenger. "Did you grow up here?" she asked. "In part," he replied. "Enough to know that this world doesn't forgive indecision." They crossed a deeper area of the city, where the structures were older. There, the technology seemed less visible, more integrated into the walls, as if it had been cultivated, not built. It was there that the first conflict revealed itself clearly. A group intercepted them, serious faces, weapons that didn't look like weapons. "She shouldn't be here," one of them said. "This accelerates what could still be controlled." The young man placed himself in front of her. "Or it prevents everything from collapsing for good," he retorted. The atmosphere grew tense. She felt that one wrong move could end it all right there. It was then that she noticed something even more disturbing. There was no consensus. The underground city was divided. Some saw in her the continuation of the pact. Others, the opportunity for a rupture. As they argued, the ground trembled slightly. This time, it wasn't a system, it was a response. Something was reacting to her presence. The confusion was enough for them to press on, but not without consequences. Shortly after, the lighting systems went out in entire sectors. "A selective blackout, their testing limits," the young man muttered. "And we are the test." They ran through narrower corridors as doors closed behind them. She felt her heart race, not just from the danger, but from the strange trust that was beginning to grow between them. In the midst of the chaos, he held her hand, not as a romantic gesture, but as a silent promise that he wouldn't leave her behind. And yet, she knew. If the moment came, he would have to choose. At a higher point in the underground city, they stopped to catch their breath. From there, it was possible to see the lower levels, pulsating like a living organism. "Did my parents know this could happen?" she asked. He took a moment to answer. "They knew you would exist," he said finally. "And that one day you would be called." That brought no comfort. It brought weight. Before they could move on, a message echoed through the complex's speakers. "The heiress has been located. Proceed with alternative protocol." The silence that followed was absolute. "Alternative protocol means capture," he said, "or elimination." She took a deep breath. She was no longer running from the mystery. She was running for her own life. And between the world she knew and the one she had just discovered, she began to understand that she didn't fully belong to either. But maybe that was exactly why she was so dangerous.
It begins when someone decides to lie, or to hide the truth for too long. After the announcement of the alternative protocol, the underground city went into a state of containment. Doors sealed, paths shifted, and the feeling of safety disappeared completely. They were guided through corridors she hadn't seen before. Older, darker, the young man seemed tense, not just because of the danger, but because of something she couldn't yet name. "There's something you're not telling me," she said. He didn't answer right away. "If I tell you now," he finally said, "you might not trust me anymore." The sentence hung in the air, too heavy to be ignored. They reached an isolated chamber, where the technology seemed different, more organic. In the center, an energy core pulsed slowly, reacting to her presence. The walls began to project images, and it was there that the betrayal was revealed. She saw her parents younger, talking with leaders of the underground faction, not as passive guardians, but as architects. They helped create the system that kept the underground world hidden, and also the system capable of controlling it. But there was more. The images changed. They showed her parents disagreeing with the direction the faction was taking, trying to end the project, trying to protect the surface. That's when everything spun out of control. The faction's division started there, and her parents were marked as a threat. "They didn't die by accident," the young man said in a low voice. "They were eliminated." The floor seemed to disappear from under her feet, but the final blow was yet to come. He took a deep breath, like someone preparing for a fall. "I was raised by them," he continued, "trained to protect the balance, or destroy it, if necessary." She stared at him. "You were always here," she said, understanding. "You didn't find me by chance." He nodded. The betrayal wasn't just in the faction. It was in him, but then came the plot twist. The images changed once more. They revealed genetic records. She wasn't just the heir to the pact. She was part of the system. Her parents had altered her own code before she was born. She could interact with the underground technology without limits. She wasn't the key, she was the core. And if I refuse, they won't allow it. It was then that the alarm sounded again. Closer, more urgent. The impossible choice was before her. If she stayed, She would have to take on a role that could condemn millions. If she fled, the underground world would collapse, taking the city, the mountains, and perhaps everything around them with it. She looked at him, the only one she trusted, the only one who had also lied. "Would you hand me over?" she asked. He hesitated. For too long, and in that split second, she knew the cruelest truth. He loved her, but he had been programmed to choose the system. Before she could react, containment forces invaded the chamber. He was torn away from her, and as she was taken, she heard the sentence that would change everything. Initiate partial activation of the heiress. The energy around her began to react, and the world was about to pay the price of truth. There are moments when time stops moving normally. For her, the world began to move in fragments. The light around began to pulse, reacting to the partial activation. It wasn't violent, it was precise, as if the system itself knew exactly what it was doing. She was led down a suspended corridor, surrounded by translucent structures that rearranged themselves as she advanced. Each step seemed to awaken something dormant in the walls, the floor, the air. The underground city reacted to her presence like a living organism recognizing its own heart. Panels lit up, codes flowed across the surfaces, and, above all, the sound. A deep, continuous pulse, synchronized with her own heartbeat. She tried to resist, she tried to slow her breathing. She tried to focus on simple memories, her parents' house, the smell of the forest, the silence of the road. But the system didn't allow for emotional escape. Images reappeared around her, memories that weren't hers. Surface cities being silently monitored, natural events being manipulated, human decisions being influenced without anyone noticing. This wasn't protection, it was control. She understood the real danger of her parents' legacy. They created something too powerful, and trusted that she would be strong enough to decide what to do with it. The procession stopped before a gigantic central chamber. The space opened up like an illuminated abyss, with floating platforms and an energy core pulsing at the center. She was positioned on the main platform. The contact happened the instant her feet touched the surface. She felt the mountains from within. She felt the world above, distant and vulnerable, and she felt him. Even far away, even separated, his presence emerged in her mind like a familiar echo. Not as surveillance, but as conflict. She realized he was trying to delay the process, that he was disobeying orders. But it wouldn't be enough. The voices emerged, amplified by the system. The heiress is stable. Partial activation successful. Proceed with full alignment. The energy core responded. The light intensified, forming geometric patterns in the air. She felt her body become light, almost floating. Not physical, emotional. She felt every possible choice, every potential future. In some, she accepted control. The world above remained in order, but free will became an illusion. In others, she broke the system. The underground world collapsed. Thousands died. No option was clean. Tears streamed down her face without her noticing. It was then that something unexpected happened. Almost imperceptible, a variable that wasn't in the calculations. The emotional bond. His presence was interfering with the activation stability. Silent alarms began to appear on the panels. Anomaly detected. Re-evaluating compatibility. She felt an opening. Small, but real, and in that breach, she did something no one predicted. She spoke to the system. Not with commands, but with intention. And the underground city listened. But she felt it was like a breath out of rhythm. A silence too brief to be a coincidence. Not in the mechanisms in her. Connected to the core, she began to understand what others merely operated. It wasn't just code, it was intentions accumulated over generations. Fear of the surface, fear of human chaos, fear of losing control. And, mixed in with all of it, there was an emotion that didn't belong to the system, love. She felt his presence again, clearer now. Not as a memory, but as active resistance. He was deactivating secondary protocols, blocking routes, creating delays too small to be noticed, but enough to buy time. She knew the price he would pay for it. The voices returned, more impatient. The heiress is demonstrating emotional instability. Full containment recommended. The pressure increased, she closed her eyes. And, for the first time since arriving in Oregon, she thought of her parents without anger. She thought of them as flawed people, scared, trying to protect a world they no longer knew how to control. They didn't want her to be a weapon. They wanted her to be a choice. The system tried to access deeper memories, moments from childhood, fragments of affection. Her bond with him .it wasn't programming. It wasn't strategy .it was unpredictable. Visual alarms began to appear throughout the chamber. The instability was spreading. She felt her body being pulled energetically towards the core. Full activation was imminent. .it was then that the communication opened. His voice emerged, faint, distorted, but real. Don't let them decide for you. The tears returned. If I stop this, she replied mentally, the world down here could die. And if you continue, he retorted, the world up there ceases to be free. The silence that followed was the choice taking form. She understood that there was no victory without loss. There never had been, but there was a third option. Risky, forbidden. She felt the core react as she began to act outside the patterns. Instead of absorbing energy, she returned it. Not as an explosion, but as a redistribution. The underground city trembled. What is she doing? Someone shouted in the distance. She began to break the central axis of control. Not destroying, but liberating. The systems entered into internal conflict. Old protocols clashed with new commands. And then came the consequence. To stabilize the process, something had to be left behind, someone. She felt it clearly. If she maintained the redistribution, she would lose her direct link to the surface. She could never fully return. She looked at the world above one last time through the projected images. The forest, the house, the road, and she thought of him. I wouldn't leave you here, his voice echoed. You already let me live, she replied. And she made the choice. The core responded with an explosion of white light. Not destructive, transformative. The underground city began to reorganize itself. Systems shut down, others gained autonomy. The central control was being dissolved. Her connection to the world above weakened rapidly. She felt the ground disappear. And she fell. Not into the void, but into something new. The silence that followed wasn't empty, .it was profound. For an immeasurable instant, there was no pain, no sound, no light. Just the sensation of movement, as if she were being carried by something greater than any decision she had ever made. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the central chamber. She was lying on a cold surface, surrounded by partially dimmed structures. The underground city still existed, but it was no longer the same. The lights were now soft, less rigid, less vigilant. The constant pulse that once dominated everything had ceased. She tried to move, she succeeded. And that, in itself, was an answer. People emerged gradually, not in formation. Not armed, confused. Free. The central system no longer commanded every step. The underground world was alive in a different way. She immediately felt the absence. The bond with the surface had been almost completely severed. She could no longer feel the city above, nor the mountains in the same way. But she still felt him. Faint, distant, but real. She followed this feeling through the corridors until she found what was left of the old secondary control chamber. He was there, but alive. When their eyes met, there were no immediate words. Some truths don't need to be spoken. He was the first to break the silence. You changed everything. She took a deep breath. Not alone. He approached slowly. The surface is safe, he said. The control is over. They can no longer interfere as they did before. She nodded, feeling the weight of the final consequence settling in her chest. But I can't go back, she replied. It wasn't a question. It was acceptance. She explained what she had done, how she redistributed the system, how a part of her was now permanently integrated into that world. She wasn't a prisoner, but she was no longer entirely free to leave either. He understood, and that's what hurt the most. They walked to one of the highest points of the underground city. From there, it was possible to see the layers of the mountain from within, softly illuminated. My parents believed this world needed to be controlled to survive, she said. I believe it needs to learn to choose. The artificial wind in the chamber moved her hair gently. And you? He asked. What do you choose now? She looked around, the people beginning to organize themselves without orders. At the technology, now silent, waiting to be used with conscience. I'm staying, she said. not to rule, but to ensure no one does this again. He smiled, sad and proud at the same time. So this is your path. She nodded. On my way. The farewell wasn't dramatic. It was real. A long hug. As he ascended towards the surface, she felt the last echo of the world she had left behind. The road, the forest, the house. Everything made sense now. She hadn't gone to Oregon to escape the pain. She had gone to find it and transform it. Months later, the city above continued as normal. No one knew exactly what had changed, but everything was different, freer. And, beneath the mountains, a new guardian walked between two worlds, not as the heiress of a mistake, but as the conscious choice of a possible future. The journey hadn't ended, she had just found her way.